Have you ever walked away from a normal conversation, and then suddenly your mind won't shut up? You replay what you said. You replay their tone. You replay their facial expression. And the more you replay it, the worse it feels. You start thinking, did I say something wrong? Did I sound stupid? Why did they respond like that? What if they misunderstood me? And before you realize it, a 5-minute conversation has turned into an hour of mental torture. If that sounds familiar, stay with me, because this isn't random, and it's not because you're weak, awkward, or broken. There's a reason your brain does this, and once you understand it, the overthinking starts to lose its grip. Before we go deeper, let me say this clearly. If you've ever felt exhausted after social interactions, confused about what people think of you, or stuck replaying conversations late at night, you're not alone. And if this video helps you even a little, take 1 second to like it or subscribe. Not because of the algorithm, but because this channel is for people who think deeply, feel deeply, and want peace in their own mind. Now let's talk about what's really happening. Overthinking after conversations isn't about the conversation itself. It's about uncertainty. Your brain doesn't panic because of what you said. It panics because it doesn't know how the other person interpreted it. And the human brain hates uncertainty, especially when connection is involved. At some point in your life, your nervous system learned a rule. Connection equals safety. So when a conversation ends without clear emotional closure, no reassurance, no obvious positive signal, your brain goes into analysis mode. Not to punish you, but to protect you. That's why overthinking feels urgent. Your mind is trying to solve something, but here's the problem. You can't solve emotions with logic, so your brain keeps looping. Most people think overthinking means you care too much about what others think. That's not entirely true. What you actually care about is belonging, and belonging has always been tied to survival, biologically and emotionally. If your brain even suspects a threat to connection, it reacts fast. That reaction looks like replaying conversations, searching for hidden meanings, assuming you made a mistake, imagining negative judgments not because they read true, but because your brain would rather assume danger than miss it. Now here's something important. You don't overthink every conversation. You overthink specific ones. Conversations with authority figures, people you admire. People you feel fully safe around, people whose approval matters to you. That's the clue. Overthinking is selective. And that tells us it's emotional, not intellectual. Think about this. You probably don't replay conversations with people you feel completely comfortable with. Why? Because there's no emotional risk. Your nervous system is calm. But when there is emotional risk, even imagined, your mind turns into a courtroom. You become the judge, the jury, and the defendant. And the verdict is almost always, something I did was wrong. This is where self-blame sneaks in. Your brain would rather blame you than accept uncertainty. Because blaming yourself gives you the illusion of control. If I find the mistake, I can fix it next time. That's why overthinking feels productive, even though it's exhausting. It feels like preparation, but it's actually self-surveillance. You start monitoring yourself constantly. How you speak, how you react, how you come across, and the more you monitor yourself, the less natural you feel. Which ironically makes future conversations feel harder. This creates a loop. Conversation gives uncertainty, gives overthinking, gives self-doubt, gives more tension next time. And once this loop starts, it reinforces itself. Now let's talk about something most people miss. Overthinking after conversations is often learned early. If at any point growing up, you learn that saying the wrong thing caused tension, expressing yourself led to criticism, silence meant disapproval, approval felt inconsistent, your nervous system adapted. It learned to scan interactions for danger. So now, even neutral conversations feel loaded. Your brain asks, what did that mean? What did I miss? What are they thinking now? And because you can't read minds, your brain fills in the blanks. usually with the worst-case scenario. That's not pessimism. That's conditioning. Another reason overthinking feels intense is because conversations end, but your brain doesn't. There's no clear resolution, so your mind keeps the file open, especially if the other person responded briefly. Changed tone, didn't he react the way you expected, ended the conversation abruptly. Your brain hates unfinished emotional loops, so it replays them again and again. Here's the part that might surprise you. Overthinking doesn't mean you lack confidence. It often means you're highly self-aware. You notice nuance. You pick up on subtle cues. You feel shifts in energy. That sensitivity can be a strength, but without boundaries, it turns inward. Instead of understanding others, you interrogate yourself. You assume responsibility for every emotional shift. And that's where the pain comes from. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, when you replay conversations, what are you actually afraid of? Not the surface fear, the deeper one. For most people, it's not embarrassment. It's rejection, disconnection, being misunderstood. It's feeling like you don't belong. Once you see that, overthinking starts to make sense. It's not a flaw, it's a defense mechanism. The problem isn't that your mind is broken. The problem is that it's working overtime to protect you in situations where protection is no longer needed. And here is the key insight that begins the shift. Most conversations are not judged the way you judge them. Other people are not replaying your words the way you are. They're replaying their own thoughts, their own worries, their own insecurities. Your mind treats conversations like performances. But for most people, they're just moments. That doesn't mean your feelings aren't real. They are. But it does mean your mind is assigning weight where there often is none. And once you understand this, something loosens. You begin to question the authority of your thoughts. You begin to notice, this is my brain trying to protect me, not telling me the truth. And that awareness is the beginning of freedom. Now we'll go deeper into why silence after conversations feels so uncomfortable, why reassurance never fully satisfies overthinking, and how to break the replay loop without forcing your mind to stop, because telling yourself to stop thinking never works. But understanding why you think does. Why did I say that? Was that awkward? What did they think of me? If your mind races with questions like these after a conversation, this is for you. And this is where most advice completely fails you. Because people tell you to just stop overthinking or don't care what others think. But your brain doesn't overthink because it wants to. It overthinks because it's trying to finish something that feels unfinished. Think about it. Overthinking almost always happens after the conversation ends. When you're alone, when there's silence. That silence is the trigger. Your brain interprets silence as uncertainty. And uncertainty, to a nervous system wired for connection, feels dangerous. So your mind starts working overtime to fill in the gaps. It asks, what did that pause mean? Why didn't they reply the same way? Did I talk too much? Did I make it awkward? And here's the important part: your brain doesn't look for neutral answers. It looks for threats, because from a survival perspective, missing a social threat mattered more than missing a social compliment. So your brain assumes the worst, not because it's negative, but because it's protective. That's why reassurance doesn't really help. Someone can tell you, no, you were fine, and for a moment you feel relief. But then the thoughts come back, because reassurance doesn't resolve uncertainty, just delays it. Your brain wants certainty, not comfort. And certainty is something you can't get from replaying the past. That's why the loop never ends. Now, let's talk about something uncomfortable but important. Overthinking after conversations is often connected to self-monitoring. At some point, you learned that how you came across mattered a lot. Maybe you learned that saying the wrong thing led to rejection, or being too quiet made you invisible. So you adapted. You started watching yourself, scanning people's reactions, learning to read the room. That skill helped you survive socially, but it came with a cost. You stopped experiencing conversations and started evaluating them. So when a conversation ends, your brain goes into review mode, replaying the footage. You analyze your tone, your words, their reaction, their silence. And the more you analyze, the less safe you feel, because analysis without feedback just turns into imagination. And imagination tends to be cruel. Another reason overthinking sticks is because your brain believes it's preventing future mistakes. If I catch what I did wrong now, I won't do it again. But you're not replaying the conversation to learn. You're replaying it to punish yourself into being better. And that just makes you more tense, which ironically increases the chance of awkwardness, reinforcing the whole loop. Notice something subtle. When you replay conversations, you rarely focus on what went well. Your mind zooms in on one look, one pause, one sentence, and treats it as evidence that you messed up. That's confirmation bias. Your brain already suspects you did something wrong, so it looks for proof and ignores everything else. That doesn't mean your feelings are fake. It just means your interpretation is incomplete. Here's a grounding truth. Most people are not analyzing you. They are analyzing themselves. They're thinking about what they said, how they came across, what they should have done differently. You're not the main character in their mental replay. You're a supporting role. But your brain doesn't know that because it only has access to your inner world. So how do you break the loop? Not by forcing your thoughts to stop, but by changing how you respond to them. The moment you notice yourself replaying a conversation, try this. Instead of asking, "Did I mess up?" ask, "What am I afraid this means about me?" That question shifts the focus, because the fear is rarely about the conversation. It's about what the conversation represents. Fear of being rejected, of being judged, of not being enough. Once you see that, the replay loses its intensity because you're addressing the root, not the symptom. Another powerful shift is learning to close the mental loop. Your brain keeps replaying because it feels unfinished. So give it an ending, not a perfect one, a neutral one. Say to yourself, "I don't have enough information to judge this accurately. I'm filling in gaps with fear. This conversation doesn't define my worth." At first, it feels fake. But repetition matters more than belief. You're training your brain to tolerate uncertainty. And that's the real skill. People who don't overthink aren't more confident. They're more tolerant of not knowing. They don't demand emotional certainty from every interaction. They let moments pass without turning them into conclusions. And you can learn that too. One more thing that changes everything. Pay attention to your body after conversations. Overthinking is often fueled by stored tension. Your shoulders tighten, your jaw clenches, your breath becomes shallow. So before you try to think your way out, regulate your body, slow your breathing. Relax your shoulders, ground yourself physically. When the body calms, the mind follows. You don't need to solve the conversation. You need to signal safety. And over time, something shifts. You still notice thoughts, but they don't spiral. You still reflect, but you don't attack yourself. Conversations stop feeling like tests and become experiences again. And here's the most freeing realization of all. Not every interaction needs to be perfect. Not every silence needs meaning. Not every reaction needs analysis. Some moments are just moments. And when you allow them to be that, your mind finally gets rest. If this resonated with you, sit with this one idea. Overthinking isn't your enemy. It's a protective habit that stayed too long. You don't need to fight it. You just need to teach your mind that you're safe even without answers. And slowly, the replay fades. Thanks for watching.